red circle is where I'm from. Of course, it's the furthest point away. And then if you look at the clans there, which is called the Kulin Nation, and you see where the Woiwurrung is, that's where I'm from. So it's Wurundjeri Woiwurrung. We were over 3,000 people before colonisation. After colonisation, we were mere 13. That is my country, and I love to show it off. We have, our traditional lands are the city of Melbourne, if people have been there. So as you can understand, we don't have many rights over that land because it's all now concrete jungle, so to speak. So when we look out there, we like to imagine, you know, the distant past and think about our people that fought so hard to keep that land, but were unable to. These are my two ancestors. So that man, William Barak, is very well known, and he was our first human rights advocate in my people, the Wurundjeri people, and he walked several times from the Corandurg, which was the mission we were put on at the time. He also walked the last walk with his son carried in his arms. His son died that last walk where we took him, and he died alone in hospital because they would not allow him to stay. The lady on the left, because I love talking about the women, our strong women before us, that is Annie Barat. We all descend, Wurundjeri people now descend only from her. She had the last living child of our clan, and we all descend from Annie Barat, but her story never gets told. So I always make a point of telling her story. And this is my nan. She was the last woman in 1924, born on the mission before the mission was closed down. I will tell you, Corandurg mission was closed down because it was making money and it was thriving, and they were putting lots of people from different clans on that mission. They closed it down, and the work that was being done there was given to the non-Indigenous, I'm just going to say the white people if I can. My mum's white, so I don't get offended by that. And they were making the money off that. They were promised hospitals and accommodation, and nothing eventuated from that. Although we still are allowed to do ceremony, we're allowed to do ceremony on some of our land still back up there, and a lot of it is Healesville Centre. It's a sanctuary for our native animals, which there's a part in the middle where we do lots of women's ceremony, and they're very generous in letting us back on our land to do that. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be putting this. So before I start, I am on Australia's first formal Truth and Justice Commission. We're not a Truth and Reconciliation, we're a Truth and Justice. There's 5 commissioners, 4 are First Peoples, 1 is not, he's a former judge. On that we have, the point I like to say is truth and justice. It's a royal commission, so we have the powers of Supreme Court judges. So we can compel government to come to the stand and answer our questions about systemic injustices from 1888 to current. We recently did child protection and criminal justice, and we were able to call the ministers that were now sitting in Parliament to the stand and question them. They're all on our website. Out of those 2, I hate to call them themes, but out of those 2 themes, we had 46 recommendations. And in the state of Victoria, we're also alongside the treaty process, so we don't have a treaty. And so whilst we're doing the truth telling, we're also negotiating a treaty. We're the only state that has what we call voice, treaty and truth all going at the same time. And if you know anything, we just lost the referendum about having a voice to Parliament, which is very sad, but in the state we're in, we're able to continue that fight for justice for our people. And I better get back to this, is why they make me go back to the slides all the time. So, we know what they all come for, and they come for the land. We just got in the way. We're still in the way, and they still want our land. Our societies were complex and thriving. We know we all had legal systems. I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here, but you'll get this. We had systems, economic and political systems. We had language, we had education, healthcare and knowledge systems. All those systems come from the land and existed to ensure our societies continue to thrive on the dry, fragile continent of Australia. They wanted our land. So first they tried to trick us out of it, then they tried to physically destroy us and remove us from the land. They stopped us from speaking our languages. And by the way, our language, where we are from, down the bottom there, no one speaks fluently in our language. We are reawakening our language and we've had to relearn our language. Our words contain the knowledge of how to care for the land. They took that, how to teach the next generation their responsibilities to people and land. They tried to stop us speaking our knowledge of the land. So they separated us from our children, our parents, our families and our communities. They also divided us from each other, so we couldn't teach our children how to care for the land. They divide us from each other to make it harder to tell each other stories of our land and the stories of our ancestors. They divide us from each other to keep us weak, separated and dependent. They divided us from each other to make it harder to keep the land and ourselves strong. They stopped us going home. They wanted our land to grow their food, build their houses, their roads, their ports. They wanted our water to irrigate their crops, to fish for food, drill for gas, and nourish their cities. They told themselves we weren't using it anyway. They told us and themselves we were just in the way. We weren't in the way, we were home. When they couldn't physically destroy us and we survived massacres, dispossession, poverty, they told us we had lost too much. They wanted to know how many of us there were so they could count us. Then they told us we were no longer Indigenous enough to be counted and not Indigenous enough to qualify for help. They told us we were too damaged to have rights. They told us we weren't enough of us to make a difference. And we were making it too much of a fuss. They told us that our rights to the land couldn't exist at the same time as theirs. So after the massacres, the dispossessions, the child removal, the family breakups, the imprisonment, the punishment for speaking language and practicing culture, they told us we could only have some rights to land if those injustices hadn't affected us. They told us whatever rights we did have were cultural, not political or economic or about the land, and only existed if we hadn't been damaged by everything they had done. They took our land, tried to destroy our families, our nations, and we speak together. And when we speak together from our places of strength to keep the land, our people become healthy. We stay healthy. We keep fighting the injustices that we have survived. And for the right to keep our land and our people healthy, we speak for country. We are country. We are the land and we act for the land as the land acts for us. And why do I speak about land? Because that is where it began. Because once you take the land, you take our stories, you take our people, you take our language. That's where we become. From the point of colonisation, that's where we become unhealthy. The primary cause of historical systemic injustice and ongoing systemic injustice is the colonial access to land. All historical injustice stems from the state's possession of Indigenous land, and all of the ongoing injustice stems from the state's refusal to allow First Nations rights to land to be exercised by First Nations land-based groups. The primary motive for genocide is not racism, but the destruction of a group. And let's be really clear, in Australia it was genocide. It is groups that are foundational units of our society and groups that assert collective rights. In Australia, First Nations society are made up of groups of people connected by language, institutions, politics, economics and culture defined by land. Indigenous societies developed from land-based rules to manage ecological fragility and social relationships. The purpose of genocide here was not simply access to land, but the destruction of land-based groups. Their knowledges, languages, rules for living and capacity to assert their rights to land in order to grant settlers access to land. Genocide is the vehicle, not the destination. Injustice is the vehicle, not the destination. The purpose of genocide in Australia is the destruction of functional groups that can assert rights over land. The destination is colonial possession of the land, and either the refusal to consider or perpetuate diminished of the collective capacity of First Nations to assert our sovereign rights over our land.